Hello everybody and welcome back to my Jool 5 series, Journey to Jool. And we are in high orbit around Pol, the final moon on this journey that we are going to visit. Yes, my series is coming to an end because this is the penultimate episode, the final episode of course. Probably being getting back to Kerbin and hopefully landing the crew safely on the ground. But first we have to do some adjustments to our encounter. We are ready to do some science as well, and here we have the man, the legend, the Kerbal, Jebediah Kerman, who will of course have the honor to land the lander on the last moon of the Jool system, and also will be piloting the big mothership, the Joolishka, back to Kerbin. And of course the usual stuff, picking up all the science we have gathered in orbit and then bringing it back to the ship, and of course then getting it onto Pol. It's been quite an interesting ride, this big mission to all of the Jool moons, and it's told me quite a lot about the game, especially about orbital mechanics inside of this game, even though I already have more than 1,000 hours in the game yet, but I never really managed to get around doing such a huge mission in one piece. Usually I'm just going to one planet, then to another, then to the next one, always with coming back to Kerbin or starting new missions. But this one was different, and here we have to make another orbital adjustments because our low orbit around Pol is not low enough. Yeah, that can happen because the gravity of this thing is so tiny, so minuscule, that you have to get really low for the science experiments to register as being in low orbit around Pol. But of course we can manage to do that, and that's what we're doing right now, and hopefully that was enough. Yes, it was. So of course it's almost, well, I would not say overkill, but you could actually deorbit the Kerbal and just land it on Pol and bring him back safely to the mothership instead of just using a big old ship. But we want to do it the old-fashioned way, and also we just don't want, not want to plant a flag and get some soil sample, but we also want to get other experiments. And whoops, I just caught a little bit on the edge of the science lab, but no matter, both of the craft are sturdy enough to survive this. So just a minor retrograde burn to get down on the surface. And this right before, well, almost before landing, this was the moment where I realized that I have forgotten to clean out my experiments again. Yes, if you take a close look inside, the materials bay is still open because we took all the science away, so I had to reload and do it all again. Of course, fun times, but well, it's the Kerbal way, isn't it? So, once more, doing the science in low orbit. Yes, it's tedious, but we have to do it. It's for the betterment of the Kerbal race, Jebediah. Don't be a sourpuss, do your work. And yep, getting the materials based science, and also getting the mystery goo, where we have to squeeze inside the cargo bay. And then, of course, now finally cleaning out the experiments. So, will we be able to detach from the ship this time without hitting it? I sure hope so. So there we go, undocking. And we're clear. So it's time to get down on the surface. We have loads of Delta V in this thing. If you remember, this was the lander that managed to get down on the lathe and back up again without any additional stages, so this should not be a problem at all. On the contrary, Pol is, well, is easy in that regard, but you know, you still have to be careful, because if you land on an inclination, then it's very likely that the lander will tip over if you're coming down too fast. So I'm really careful here. Whoops, and nope, yeah, we did it. And then it's time to do more science, and of course to do some EVA, plant our flag, and get some soil samples. And by soil I don't mean soiling your trousers, I mean from the ground of the moon. Yeah, you can see the gravity is really low here, and also, ooh, look at that mystery rock spitting me out. We should investigate this even further, but first let us do our duty. The final flag on this mission, the final flag that we're going to plant on this mission, and of course a beautiful panoramic view of Jool in the backdrop. Look at that. And now let's get back to the lander, avoid that rock so it does not spit us out again. And then it's time, well, not to get back to the ship, but to get to another biome, because, well, why not? I've got enough of Delta V left, and of course there's a biome straight around the corner. So let's just do this. Getting up there, and, well, of course I'm increasing my chances to crash by trying to land again, but, you know, no risk, no fun. And of course this is Jebediah we're speaking of. He is, of course, the ace pilot of the Kerbal Space Program, as you all may know. And we are already seeing the tiny spikes of Pol, which are, of course, just some terrain effects that don't have any effect at all on the lander if we should land on them. Looks flat enough, still being careful that we don't hit the surface too hard. Careful now. And yes, beautifully done, Jebediah. Thank you. And once more, we do all the science we can do, and thankfully we have a second mystery goo canister on board where we can grab some more, yeah, well, goo of course. So let's get some more soil samples, and let's get that mystery goo data. And then it's time to say goodbye to Pol, and also goodbye to the Jool system, incidentally, because, as I mentioned before, this is it. This is the final moon on our journey. But before we can head back home, we have to get back to our mothership again. And that means trying to match their orbits. So, as I said before, enough Delta V in this tiny lander to pull that off, but of course the battery could be a problem, because a few episodes back I ruined my solar panels while aerobraking on lathe. Yeah, stupid me. I forgot to retract the panels while entering the atmosphere. So we're merely on battery power, but it should be enough to last us for some a few more maneuvers. And there's the ship. Trying to match its speed, and then join up with it. So there we go, just head into the sun so we can see what we're doing. Aiming for the docking port. and then getting in there with our RCS that we have of course refueled before we left the cargo bay. Some bumps here and there, well, it's pretty banged up right now, the mothership, but that doesn't matter because there's only one more thing left that it has to do, well, two maybe. First is doing the transfer burn from the Jool system to Kerbin, and then of course performing an air brake in Kerbin's atmosphere so we can get home safely. And then Jebediah takes his rightful place in the cockpit of the Joolishka, where he will of course lead the mission back home, transferring all the Kerbals back to the lander can and the cockpit, so they are in the parts that will be detached and brought down to the surface when we get back to Kerbin. So we're leaving Pol, which is just a minor burn, heading out of the sphere. Okay. No, not heading out of the sphere of influence of Pol. Jool does not seem to make me wanna leave. So there we go, and finally we are out, so it's time to do our transfer, and yeah, I'm using MacJab for this because that saves me quite some time juggling around maneuver nodes and trying out the best approach to the target planet. And with this pork chop selections, it's really easy to find the right maneuver node. And then I'm just manually adjusting the node so the periapse is on a prograde orbit and somewhere around the equator. And then it is time for our final burn outside of the final burn inside the sphere of influence of Jool, but the final burn that will get us out of the influence of Jool and back to the plane of the sun and then into Kerbin's sphere of influence. The 21 neutral engines firing and heating up while doing so. Meanwhile, after spending most of our fuels, we have quite the high thrust to weight ratio compared to when this mission started. So we're easily managing to do our burn, make some minor corrections, and then it's time to say goodbye to Jool and hello to Kerbin, where we will meet up for the final episode. Until then, goodbye.